Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to something new, something different, something which I like to call Michel's Book Corner. My name is Michel. This right here, as you can see, is a corner, and there's some books in it. Don't worry, if you don't get it, let me explain what's going on. So, during this time of the coronavirus, a lot of people are at home, and schools are closed, and I feel that a lot of people are just trying to find themselves with a lot of time in their hands, and not really knowing what to do with it, since there's not a lot which you can do. So what do people do? Well, mostly you watch Netflix movies, you watch series, you play games. If the Steam charts are to be believed, well, 25 million people choose to play games every day, which is good. But one thing that I really enjoy to do is reading. So I think reading is a really cool thing to do. I think there are many benefits to reading. First of all, I think reading allows you to gain an understanding about a wide variety of topics and characters and settings, because it kind of allows you to transport your mind to places where the author takes you. I think it's a really, really cool way to, expand your world through reading a book. The second thing which I think is really cool about reading is that it allows you to learn a lot about many different fields which you may not know about. Keep in mind that writing a book isn't a very easy thing. It's not as easy as making a video. So when someone decides that they want to write a book, it's they're going to have to take a lot of time to make sure that the book is a book. So they must believe that what they write down is interesting. Otherwise, they wouldn't devote the time to it. So if someone believes it's interesting, who knows? Might be interesting to check out yourself too. Thirdly, I just think it's a lot of fun. I just think reading is a lot of fun. It's a nice pastime activity. I enjoy to do it. So what do I want to do with this series? Other than make myself look awkward standing here in my corner. Because this is unlike anything that I've do before. I'm sorry if this video is a bit weird, if I'm standing around a bit awkwardly. I'm trying to see if I can make this into something. I don't know. But what I want to do, as long as the corona time lasts, as long as we're stuck at home, I want to do one of these episodes every week. And in these episodes, what we're doing is covering two books, as you can see right here, which are connected, or which I connect through one single theme. And I'll get to the theme later. So I want to make one thing very clear. I do not expect you to read along with me. I know that two books every week is a lot of reading. I know that I can read rather fast, and I'm kind of ahead already for next week. But I just want to point out two books. So if you don't like one, maybe the other will interest you. And you don't have to read them this week. You can watch this video next week, the week after, maybe a year from now. Who knows? I just hope that with this series I might spark an interest in you. If you don't like reading yet, maybe this will get you to discover it. And if you do like reading, maybe we can have a little bit of a discussion about the books. Have a little book club. Haha! Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get into the theme of today. Today's theme is understanding perspective through characters. So what do I mean with that? Understanding perspective through characters. So one of the very interesting, fascinating things about us human beings is that we can abstract ourselves. So in our brain, we can think about things without actually doing them. So what you see a lot with evolution is that evolution will generate a lot of different beings with slightly different variations. And in order to test which variation will work, they will the beings will come to life, they'll live their life, and the variations that work succeed to reproduce and survive, and the variations that don't work just die, which is kind of what you do with ideas. However, what the thing is that we do it abstractly. We can create ideas. We can create a virtual character within ourselves, within our head, which can run a simulation of an idea that you have, and without you having to die, that virtual character could go ahead and die for you, so that you know that that's a bad idea. I should not run off this cliff because that will definitely kill me, and you'll live to see another day, which is a really, really cool thing. As a result, the way that you can do that with imagining scenarios and thinking about whether this is a good idea or not, books can kind of do the same. Because when you're reading a book, or at least when I'm reading a book, it's you're creating this this little story inside your head, or you're reading this story and you can imagine it in front of you. And because you can imagine what is happening in the book, it might teach you things in real life. It sounds a bit ooh, this thing teaches me in real life, but I've never had that. I am not this exact character. It's no. The thing which I want to focus on today is putting yourself in the place of the characters that are in this book. So like, or in these two books. So like, as I say, with like abstracting yourself, making yourself like a simulated character that like runs off the bridge or runs off the cliff and then dies, and then be like, well, I should not follow him. Let me follow the simulated version of myself that just like doesn't do that. These books can like give you simulated versions of different characters that act according to like their ideas, their vision, their frame of mind. And for reading that and for understanding like why they act the way they act and where they come from, you can understand the perspective of like who they are, and that might help you not only like understanding yourself, but also understanding different people in the real world that might be like the characters in the book. So that's kind of what I'm coming from today. I find it quite fascinating. I find it quite a cool thing to look at. So keep that in mind as we're going through this. It's kind of like the overarching theme, understanding perspective through the characters. So we're trying to understand what the idea is behind like why do the characters act the way they act. That's kind of the idea that I'm reading these books in. It's not that you have to look for them, because the books here kind of like perfect these perspectives really well. So with that out of the way, with the theme in mind, let's get into our very first book, which is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Now, there's actually a specific reason that I want to start off this thing with this book right here. Because I read this book in high school, and I didn't like it. So let me explain. When I had to read this book in high school, we were like forced to like read certain chapters for every week. We had like literature class, and I'm sure that people have like can relate with that. Having to go for these chapters, and then we had to focus on like the English language, like what kind of words are being used, like what does the author mean with this, what does the author mean with that, you know, the meme about like the curtains are blue signifies that there is a depression in the characters' love life, where the author just meant the curtains are fucking blue because I just want to have a color that's blue. So yeah, like I didn't really like that, because like you had to like read chapters, summarize them, and like it didn't compel me. Like I wasn't grabbed into this book because it was like, read this, and not like, why should I read it? It was just like, you had to read this. So when I went back to it later on, I wanted to read this book more while trying to understand the characters. I was like, let me read this thing as like a psychological novel, and I loved it. I really, really loved it. So that's also why I'm trying to work with this theme. I'm not trying to say like this is the theme that like you should only read this book into, but like it's a starting point maybe if you want to get into this book. That really helped me like really appreciate this novel. I've read it like 2 or 3 times ever since, which if you told me when I had to read it in class, oh fuck no, I would not have believed myself. But no, it really helped me like having this different frame in which I was reading this to like really get gripped by it. So I actually really like it. I think it's very good. So let me give a quick rundown of what Wuthering Heights is all about. Basically, this book is a tragedy. So the story kind of like is centered around this family that lives in Wuthering Heights. It's kind of set in the late 1700s, early 1800s, where the father of, I don't know if I should turn my head away. All right, I'm gonna face the camera from now on, not turn away, because like the microphone's right there. Ooh. Alright, so as I was saying, this story is centered around a family that lives in this house called Wuthering Heights. And it's kind of set in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And it kind of starts off when the father of 2 children, Hindley and Catherine Urchel, comes back home from London, bringing home a homeless child named Heathcliff. Now, this may initially seem to be like a good deed in a tragedy, but like it might just be like the only good deed that's really being done, which kind of sets up this entire thing. Because basically, bringing in this child makes the situation get a lot worse. Not with bad intent, might I say. But what happens is that it's a very understandable situation where the father comes in with a child, which is completely unknown to the entire family. The 2 children were promised to like get some presents from the dad, and then like instead they get this child, and their presents are like destroyed or lost because like the father had to worry himself about bringing the child home. So like the children immediately don't like this kid. Like if you're promised a present and instead you don't get your present because there's some kid here which you don't know, you're not gonna like him. Which in turn the father doesn't like, because he would like his children to get along with this child that he found, this poor child that he found in the streets. Like he'd like them to get along. So he kind of like starts favoriting Heathcliff. And that starts this very interesting dynamic where everyone kind of feels like ill will towards each other. And it's very understandable. So like, this is one thing which is really, really fascinating about like reading through Wuthering Heights, is seeing everyone act in a way which makes everything worse. And it's just so insane. It is just so insane. Like throughout the story, you'll see how the like unresolved conflicts or between characters will just make things go from bad to worse. And like this doesn't just concern itself to like the 4 people living in that household, the 4 people of that family. No, it will also like concern itself in bringing itself to like multiple generations in the neighboring household, and like it will go as far as like having people dying as well because of the things that like this kind of instigated. Now I think it's very interesting because like in most stories what you see is that like people that do bad are kind of portrayed as like the villain that just does do bad because I'm a villain and I do villainous things. But here you can kind of like understand as like why people act in like a knowingly way that will make things worse, because they're aware most of the time that like what they do will make things worse. But like you can see as to why they think it'd be justified, and I think that that's like a really, really interesting read. This book may be a little bit on the harder side though if you're starting with reading. I wouldn't recommend this as like your starter book, but I think it's really cool to see like it's kind of like realistic in that sense. Like not everything in life is going to be like beautiful and happy and great. It's like there is also bad things happening, not just because like I'm a villain and I want to do bad things, but because people like feel a justification in doing it, and maybe they had other intentions and it just turned out really bad. So it's a really interesting strategy to read it, a psychological strategy in that sense, which I think like the perspectives, if you really read for the characters, like what kind of perspective do they have, what kind of justifications for the actions that they have, it's really interesting. And like Heathcliff, like kind of like the character around this entire story like centers around him, is also a really interesting character with that. So yeah, that being said, kind of a hard book, not necessarily my recommendation as like one of your first books to get into, but that's also why I have chosen Children of Time to read. I want to do like every single week, I want to do like 2 books where like one book might be a little bit harder. If I can let that stand up, maybe I should just like put it down because like it will fall over. And one book is a little bit easier because I don't know what kind of like reading levels you'll have, what kind of like how much you're into reading. I like reading more serious stuff a little bit more, but I do not dislike this either. Like this is really, really good. So this book is amazing. I read it twice. It's a lot of fun. Instead of being centered in like the 1700s, 1800s, this thing is actually a science fiction book, which is set into the far, far future. I love it. This is really, really fucking great. So the idea behind Children of Time is that it kind of starts up with a setting where the human race has like created this technology to like move into the universe and like expand to like colonize planets, like go very far, far away, put people into cryosleep so they can like move around, all that sort of stuff. And also experiment with different life forms and like different like nanobots and all that sort of stuff. However, as you might expect, there's a lot of resistance against this because people don't want to see people play God, and there's this big war which kind of is played off to the side. Like we're not really into this, but like big war goes on and like kind of destroys most of civilization. Everyone's dead, and the only thing that remains is like this one colony ship right here. So this ship going around is actually set like thousands of years after like this big war, where these people like have slept for thousands of years into cryosleep in order to like find a galaxy where they can maybe find a good planet to live on. And these people know very little about what happened before. They just have this ship and they're trying to like find a new planet, which they ultimately find. Like they find a planet that looks really good to live on. However, this planet is guarded by a scientist, like an old scientist from like thousands of years ago, who's kind of like fused up with her AI, because she's been running an experiment on like a different species that isn't human in order to see like if she could like raise them up to be the same intellect as humans, and then like see what they do, like how do they act, and then maybe like become their goddess in a sense. Obviously that causes conflict. She doesn't want that, so she kind of sends them away. So you have the scientist who was like protecting her thing, you have the humans that are desperately trying to find a place to survive, and those are also like the perspectives. Like the interesting thing within the humans is that you also find within them different approaches as to like how do you survive, like what are the tactics to survive. Are you gonna try and like barge into one place, or are you gonna like leave people behind on like deserted barely habitable places as like a backup for humanity in case like the ship fails. And then probably something which I found the most interesting of all is like the emergent species, because the experiment has worked to some regard. I don't want to spoil anything about that, but like what's happening is like this emergent species is like evolving and like learning new things, but not in the same way that we did. Like no, like it's not like the evolution the way that we gotten through like our very early ages to right now. So you'll find different ways of like the way that they approach life, the way that they approach like technological like evolution and all that sort of stuff is really, really cool to see. And basically like these perspectives are provided so well like in the book. I just love it. I just love it. But yeah, like especially like following the species like over time to see like how they move up from just being like a regular creature that you might find on Earth to like this very intelligent thing is really, really fascinating to follow. Like there has been a lot of careful thought put into it. The main character of the story, I've heard it being criticized that like, oh, he's not very proactive. He's not really like at it. I don't like that. I'm quite happy with it. Like I'm quite happy with like the main character being kind of like more analytical, as with this book you kind of like want to experience what's going on. You kind of want to see what like everyone does and why they do it. And like at the end with the conflict, because there will be a conflict, like I didn't know what to root for. Like I don't know what to root for. And like if you had a very active protagonist in this, then like you kind of be pointed at like this is the person you got to root for. No. That being said, I don't want to spoil too much about it. Like, I think they like looking at the perspectives of all the different people or all the different creatures within it as to like why they do what they do is really interesting. The ending is also very surprising. Don't want to spoil anything about that. This is like kind of like a book corner where we discuss the books, but I don't want to spoil anything because I kind of want you to like read it and have the surprise with the books as you read them and go along with them. So yeah, anyway, that was Michel's Book Corner for this week. I hope you enjoyed. This is the first time I do it. I'm hoping that like I'm gonna get better at this. This is not at all like making gaming videos or doing vlogs, because I kind of want to like give you something that has a little bit more value than just me like rambling with whatever comes up the top of my head. But hey, I'm not omniscient with these books. Like, I'm not saying like this is the only way to read them. If you have a different way of reading them, if you think that like I disagree with the way that you looked at these, then like please let me know in the comments, because like those things are like cool for discussion. I like that. So yeah, that being said, I do have 2 books for next week, which are All Tchaikovsky with Brave New World and I Am Legend by Richard Mathewson. This is a little bit of a harder book. This is a little bit of an easier book, and I'll be discussing next week's with like what theme I'm going to be reading them in. So if you want to read them for next week, you don't have to. You can. These are going to be the 2 books for next week. I hope you enjoyed. This is super new. I hope you like it. Let me know in the comments what you think. And yeah, if there's anything that we can improve on, let's use this time that we're at home, the coronavirus is going on. Let's use this time to like do something new, like develop ourselves in a way that we might not have done before. Maybe by reading, or maybe read more if you really like reading. Anyway, I'll see you guys around. See you next week for another episode of Michel's Book Corner.